A lot of you already know about the whole situation involving Papoose and Clarissa Shields. At the center of that conversation is the fact that Papoose was still legally married to Remy Ma while Clarissa was involved with him. That's why people started questioning the relationship and asking why Clarissa would get involved with a man whose divorce was still pending. Papoose filed for divorce in May 2025, but reports continued to describe him as legally married while the process was ongoing, and Clarissa has taken plenty of criticism over the situation. But here's where things get interesting. Similar conversations started surrounding Latto and 21 Savage, although the circumstances aren't actually the same. For years, people speculated that 21 Savage was married to Kiana Joseph, and Latto's relationship with him has been heavily discussed online. But more recently, Latto directly said that 21 Savage is not married, which changes an important part of that comparison. Still, people have continued comparing the two situations and asking why Clarissa has received so much more criticism. And guess who decided to step into the conversation and call it out?
Y'all don't talk about 21 Savage and Latto. Latto don't get no backlash for getting pregnant by a married. If Clarissa Shields was a light-skinned girl, mixed breed, nobody would have a problem with her. But because she's a darker skin complected black woman, who's in physical shape, you can't beat her up. She got a mouth on her. She speaks out against somebody who speaks up against her. And they're trying to vilify her. Why are they trying to vilify her? Because Papoose and Remy Ma had a public separation. Remy Ma got caught cheating with another. She left Papoose for another. Papoose stayed single for a while. Took him a year or so, and he got with Clarissa. What the wrong? Because they ain't got married. Or he ain't got a divorce. Got a wife and a girlfriend. Clarissa Shields is everything you want your dark-skinned daughter to grow up to be. I would want my niece to be. Yeah, bitch, he ain't. Why do she have to have a problem with him still being married like y'all do? So fat on the morning show with Jock and Shawty. I was on there. The to be sad with me too. Fat ain't got no room to be sad and messy. Answer that question from a place of love. That was a question.
You old, ugly, scrawny, country. Talking about walking. What this bitch say? Talking about acting like I'm a boss. And watch your mouth with that bitch word.
Now, some people are going to look at this and say the difference is simply that Clarissa Shields is dark-skinned while Latto is lighter-skinned. But I think the actual issue being discussed goes much deeper than that, and we need to have an honest conversation about what people are really reacting to here. If you look at Latto, a woman without children who had plenty of opportunities in front of her as a successful female rapper, some people are going to question why she would choose to have her first child with a man who already has multiple children and a complicated personal situation. To me, that speaks to a much bigger shift in how serious relationships are being valued. I talk about leverage all the time on this channel and on my other channel, so let's go back to the 1990s for a second. Back then, many of the athletes we grew up admiring were married. And this isn't something limited to America. You can see similar relationship patterns developing in different parts of the world. It also goes beyond Black American dating and shows up in interracial relationships and other communities. If someone has money, doesn't want to use protection, and is willing to have children without marriage, that decision can happen very quickly. I remember when I first went to Uganda, for example, and while single motherhood had been increasing across parts of Africa, it didn't always feel as widespread as it does today. Nairobi, Kenya was similar when I first visited in 2018. That was roughly 8 years ago, and the landscape has changed a lot since then. Today, it isn't unusual to see large numbers of single mothers, with populations growing in places where marriage isn't necessarily keeping pace. I was actually looking at Daily Monitor in Uganda today, and there was an interesting article titled "Popping the Big Question, Is the Bride for Sale?" It focused on bride price and the enormous financial expectations that can sometimes come with marriage. I was even at a Ugandan wedding on Saturday, which is why I wasn't posting much. There was an introduction ceremony and the wedding on the same day, and seeing everything the groom was expected to provide was eye-opening. There was food included in the bride price, cash was included, furniture and sofas were part of it too, and this was considered a relatively modest wedding. The total cost could have been somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000. At the same time, when you look at the average man in parts of East Africa, you have situations where women may have children with men who aren't able to provide much, while expectations remain that somebody else will eventually step in and provide for the family. And that brings me back to Latto. Some people are going to argue that the bigger problem is that she simply didn't have the relationship options they believe she should have had. Nobody wants to say that out loud, and people definitely don't want to have that conversation publicly. But that's the argument being made. And when someone chooses to have a child with 21 Savage, some people interpret that as evidence that she decided the available options were limited. You're also seeing women enter relationships with men who already have established families because those men can offer stability, financial support, and security. Even Claressa Shields had a previous relationship with Tony Richardson. Shout out to him. He's a certified fitness trainer and gym owner from the Flint, Michigan area. I think he's a good brother. But some people looked at that relationship and assumed Claressa ended the engagement because she had become much more famous than he was and wanted someone operating on a bigger platform. Then Papoose entered the picture, and suddenly she was connected to a much bigger name in entertainment. From that perspective, some people believe her decision was about moving into a different level of visibility and status. But that also raises another question. If someone as famous and accomplished as Claressa Shields still struggles to find the kind of partner people expect her to have, what does that say about the broader dating market? A lot of women are looking for men who can provide stability, financial support, and security, while a lot of men aren't necessarily interested in traditional marriage. When those expectations don't line up, people start making different choices. And you can see that in situations involving men with multiple children as well. Look at Nick Cannon. 30 years ago, it would have been much harder to imagine someone openly saying, "I'm not looking for a traditional relationship, I have multiple partners," and having that arrangement discussed so casually in mainstream culture. Today, those kinds of situations are far more visible. There are women who openly acknowledge being mothers to Nick Cannon's children, and some are perfectly comfortable with that arrangement. But whether you agree with it or not, it reflects a broader shift in how people approach relationships. Until people are willing to acknowledge that the dating and relationship market has changed significantly over the last 20 years, we're going to keep having these same conversations. And I don't think the explanation is simply skin tone. It's not about whether someone is lighter or darker. It exists in different forms in many places, including parts of Africa, where those arrangements can be more openly understood as part of the relationship culture. I've seen these patterns myself, but I also want to be respectful about how we discuss them. Women are not worthless, just like men are not worthless. The issue is that some people increasingly view serious relationships as too expensive, too complicated, or too restrictive to pursue. That's the reality I believe we're watching unfold. And if you disagree with that assessment, that's fine. But you can't deny that the relationship landscape is changing in real time. You're going to continue seeing these patterns around the world, especially if economic pressure increases, unemployment rises, and wages fail to keep up with the cost of living. Some women are going to make practical decisions based on what they need to survive, while others will say, "I can struggle on my own and still be okay." But not everybody is going to make that choice. Some people are going to look at who already has resources, stability, and influence, and they're going to choose that situation instead.